My dad sacrificed everything for family, but he forced me to bear a burden he never had to face. Years of silence and unseen struggles left me feeling invisible and alone. I gave all I had, yet was blamed and dismissed like I meant nothing. I grew up believing my father was a superhero, not because he wore a cape or saved lives in the way comic books told it, but because of the things he gave up quietly without complaint for the sake of others. My father is the eldest among his siblings, 4 sisters and 1 younger brother. In most families, being the eldest means you're respected, looked up to, maybe even spoiled with a little extra authority. But in our family, it meant sacrifice. Endless soul. From a very young age, my father had to shoulder responsibilities that no teenager should ever know. When their father, my grandfather, died suddenly, he was barely 17. My grandmother, overwhelmed and grieving, leaned heavily on him to become the man of the house. And without hesitation, he stepped into the role. He gave up his education first. He was bright, top of his class, but school became a luxury the family could no longer afford. He dropped out and started working odd jobs, construction deliveries, anything that brought money home. His dreams of becoming an engineer buried quietly under piles of unpaid bills. The hardest part, he told me once with eyes full of quiet pain, wasn't the work or the long hours. It was watching his siblings get to live the life he couldn't. He paid for their school supplies while he patched up his only shirt. He skipped meals so they could eat. And when his sisters came of age, it was he who took out loans to pay for their weddings. Lavish ceremonies full of gold jewelry and silk saris. Everything needed to impress the groom's family. My father buried himself under years of hard labor, drowning in debt that wasn't even his to begin with. And not once did he complain. He simply kept going. For his mother, for his siblings, for the family. He never talked about his dreams. I never saw a photo of him from his teenage years with school friends or a letter from a girl he might have once loved. It was as if he had erased that part of himself entirely. And I grew up idolizing that. I thought this is what strength looks like. This is what it means to love your family. But as I got older, I started noticing something that didn't sit right. Despite everything he had done, his sisters treated him like nothing. I remember the first time I saw it clearly. We had gone to visit my aunt for a family gathering. Her house was massive, like something out of a design magazine. My dad, in his simple shirt and worn-out sandals, greeted her with a warm smile. "Dee Dee," he said affectionately, but she barely looked at him. Instead, she waved him off and said, "Oh, you've come. Sit somewhere. Don't get in the way." I was stunned. This was the man who sold his watch, his father's only keepsake, to help pay her dowry. And now she didn't even offer him water. It wasn't just her. All his sisters seemed to act as though he were an obligation, rather than the brother who saved their lives. They were well off now, married into wealthy families, attending charity events, taking vacations abroad. And my father, still driving an old scooter, still working overtime to pay the mortgage, still helping my uncle, who never held a stable job just because he's your younger brother. What broke me the most was seeing his face in those moments. He never showed anger, just resignation. As if he had long accepted that his worth to them had expired the moment they didn't need him anymore. I began to see the cracks in his armor, the pain he never spoke of. His sisters would gossip about how he never did enough, or how he didn't turn out successful, completely ignoring the fact that their own success was built on his sacrifice. And my grandmother, she never defended him, not once. She would sit silently as they disrespected him. Sometimes she even joined in. He always liked to fight, she'd say, never had patience like his sisters. I remember watching his expression harden every time she said that. He never talked back, but his silence was deafening. That's when I began to feel something shift inside me. Anger, injustice, confusion. How could they treat him like this, after everything he gave up? And worse, why did he accept it? I asked him once on a rainy evening when he was repairing a broken window in our kitchen, "Dad, why don't you say anything when they insult you?" He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Because if I start counting what I've done for them, I'll have to start hating them for forgetting it. And I don't want to carry that in my heart." It was the saddest thing I'd ever heard. That night, I cried silently in bed. I cried for the boy who lost his youth, for the man who lost his dignity, for the father who gave everything and got nothing in return. And deep down, I felt a fear starting to grow. What if the same thing happened to me? What if this cycle of sacrifice and silence was the legacy he unknowingly passed down to me? But I didn't say it out loud. Not yet. I just watched, listened, waited, until I realized I didn't have to wait long, because the burden he carried so quietly for decades was already making its way to me. The thing about gratitude is that it fades fast for people who never had to sacrifice. And my aunts, my father's 4 sisters, forgot everything he did for them the moment they no longer needed him. It wasn't just the occasional rudeness or the cold receptions at family events. It was the deliberate way they erased him from their narrative. I would hear them speak of their past, how hard their lives were growing up, how they struggled to become something. They never mentioned the brother who worked construction sites in the rain, the boy who carried bricks while they studied for exams. In their stories, they were the heroes. Sometimes I'd overhear conversations that made my blood boil. One aunt said if Paya had been smarter, maybe he would have made something of himself too. Another once laughed and said he was always too emotional. That's why he never got ahead. Too emotional. This was the man who skipped meals so they could eat, who gave up scholarships so they could stay in school, who sold every dream he had so they could live theirs. And what had they done in return? Absolutely nothing. They didn't visit us unless it was for a festival where they could show off their silk saris and gold bangles. They never called unless they needed something. Help moving house, finding a contact, getting someone to pick them up from the airport. And my father, he always said yes. One time, my aunt's son, my cousin, had a minor legal issue. She called my dad in tears. He dropped everything, drove 5 hours to help, and spent 2 nights sleeping on a plastic chair outside a police station. Later, I found out she told her friends that it was her husband who handled the whole thing. My father's name never came up. I started noticing how their children, my cousins, treated us too. Like we were beneath them. They'd laugh at our old car, make comments about our modest home. Once my cousin casually asked me, "Do you even travel abroad, or are you always here?" That "here" carried 1,000 unspoken insults. My sister and I were always polite, always tried to maintain some form of dignity. But inside, I was seething. Not just because they looked down on us, but because I could see the pain it caused my father, even if he never admitted it. He used to look forward to their visits. He'd clean the house, buy their favorite snacks, ask me to help him find old photos to share with them. And when they arrived, they barely glanced at him. One of my aunts even once said, "Paya, why haven't you repainted the walls? This place looks so dusty." I could see the light fade from his eyes in moments like that. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, was how my grandmother treated all of this like it was normal. She doted on her daughters, cooked for them, defended them, laughed at their jokes, even when they were clearly mocking my father. And whenever my dad tried to stand up for himself gently, respectfully, she would shut him down. "They're your sisters," she would say. "Don't talk back." But Ma, he'd say quietly, "They don't even speak to me kindly." "That's because you provoke them," she'd snap. Every single time. I used to think grandmothers were supposed to be loving and fair, a bridge between generations, a source of wisdom. But my grandmother, she had made up her mind long ago. Her daughters could do no wrong. Her son, he was just a burden, a shadow of the man she hoped he'd be. One evening after a particularly humiliating visit, I found my dad sitting alone in the backyard. He was holding a photograph, an old one from the 80s. All 5 siblings were in it. My dad was young, smiling, holding his youngest sister on his lap. He looked up at me and said, "They used to love me once." I didn't know what to say. Because I could see it, he wasn't asking for money or status or even an apology. He just wanted love, respect, a little acknowledgement. But that's what trauma does, I suppose. It teaches you to expect nothing, to accept less, to stay silent. And deep inside me, something was beginning to snap. Because I realized that the women who should have celebrated my father, the man who made their lives possible, had instead decided he was disposable. They walked on the foundation he built with bloody hands and bare feet, and then laughed as they kicked dust in his face. It wasn't fair. It was cruel. And it made me wonder if they could do that to him, what would my own family do to me? Because as I was slowly beginning to see, this wasn't just my father's story. It was mine too. The same disrespect, the same disregard. the same weight of responsibility on one child's shoulders while everyone else took and took and took. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down I knew I was next. I used to believe I would never become like my father, that I could somehow break the cycle, stop the generational pattern of sacrificing everything only to be disrespected by the very people you love the most. But now I realize I've been on that same path for years, quietly, unknowingly, until it swallowed me whole. I'm the eldest daughter. Since I was little, I was told to set an example, to be responsible, to take care of my younger sister, and I did gladly at first. I thought I'm the older one, I should love and protect her. But as we grew up, the imbalance became harder to ignore. My sister has never known the weight of responsibility. She never had to skip what she wanted so someone else could have more. She never had to bottle up tears or walk on eggshells. She's always been protected, cherished even. And me, I was just the one who should have known better. I remember one particular evening. I came home exhausted after a long day of classes and part-time work. The moment I stepped in, my sister started yelling because she couldn't find her phone charger. I was too tired to respond. She stormed into the living room, pointed straight at me and snapped, "You hid my charger, didn't you?" "You're always so selfish." I barely had the energy to look at her, let alone argue. But my father walked in and, without asking what happened, immediately scolded me. There she goes again, causing drama over nothing, always looking for a fight. I stood frozen. My heart sank. He didn't even ask me if I was okay. Not once. Just like always, my sister was the victim and I was the villain. It hit me hard no matter how much. I do. No one sees it. Not my father, not my sister. To them, I'm just someone who's supposed to endure. Eventually, I stopped trying to explain myself. I gave up on defending my side. Because what's the point? I'm always overreacting, and my sister is always just being a kid. Every time I gently call her out or try to talk to her, my father immediately jumps in with, "You're always making a big deal out of nothing. Can't you just be a bit more understanding? You're the older one, act like it." But when does being older mean never being heard, never being allowed to hurt? I tried to connect with my sister. I shared things with her. I opened up. I wanted that sisterly bond I saw others have. But she always brushed me off, called me dramatic, clingy, annoying. And when I gave her space, she called me cold and distant. I was damned if I did, and the worst part, I started to change. There were days I lashed out at friends over small things. Times I cried over a broken light bulb or a misplaced item. I felt like I was breaking down piece by piece from holding everything in for so long. I used to believe that if I just worked hard enough, stayed kind enough, sacrificed enough, someone would see my worth. But that day never came. In this family, the more you give, the more invisible you become. And sometimes I hate what that has turned me into. I resent my sister not just for how she treats me, but for how everyone lets her get away with it. I know she's a product of the way she was raised, but that doesn't make it easier to forgive. One day, I finally said it aloud to my father. I feel like no matter how much I try, I'm always the one being blamed. It's not fair. He looked at me for a second and replied, "You're the older sister. You should know how to handle things." That sentence felt like a prison sentence, as if being born first meant I forfeited my right to feel, to cry, to be angry, to ask for more. Being the eldest meant I had to carry it all silently. But how much is too much? How many years of being quiet, polite, and selfless does it take before someone says thank you, or even just, "Are you okay?" I don't know. What I do know is this: if I don't break the pattern now, I will grow old just like my father, surrounded by people who never appreciated what he gave and filled with a lifetime of regrets. And I don't want that. Not for me. Not anymore. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It lingers quietly like a fog that seeps into every part of your life. That's the kind of pain I carry now. The worst part of growing up in a family that doesn't see you is that eventually you start to believe you don't exist. I don't mean in a dramatic attention-seeking way. I mean in the subtle, soul-crushing sense where your needs, your voice, and even your presence feel optional to everyone else like background noise. I wake up early every morning. I clean the house, do laundry, make sure my sister's uniform is ironed. Sometimes even pack lunch for her and my dad, and nobody says a word. Not even a simple thanks. But if I forget to do any of it, I become the lazy one, the ungrateful one, the one who's always thinking about herself. I've noticed how I've started shrinking myself everywhere, not just at home. At school, I hesitate to raise my hand even when I know the answer. I apologize for things that aren't my fault. I let friends interrupt me mid-sentence and laugh it off like it doesn't sting. It's like I've internalized this belief I don't matter as much. My words don't carry weight. My feelings are a burden. It wasn't always like this. As a child, I had dreams. I used to sing loudly, dance in front of the mirror, and tell people I wanted to be a writer, an artist, someone that lit up a room. But now I avoid mirrors. I whisper when I speak. I question everything I say before I say it, afraid of sounding too much. There was one time a few months ago when I tried to open up to my dad. I had spent days studying for a scholarship exam and ended up scoring in the top percentile. It was a big deal to me, maybe my way out of this house, of this pattern. I rushed to tell him, hoping he'd be proud, but all he said was, "Good. Don't get distracted. Your sister's still not doing well in school, help her." That was it. "No, I'm proud of you." "No, you did great." Not even a smile. He redirected my moment of joy into another responsibility. That night I cried in silence. And as I lay on my bed, I realized something: I could save this entire family from a burning house. And they would still ask me why I didn't save the laundry too. The worst feeling isn't being hated. It's being invisible. I've tried to convince myself that if I just work harder, love louder, stay more patient, maybe then they'll see me. But the truth is, no one sees the one holding everything together. They only notice when you fall apart. I'm tired of holding it all in. Tired of hiding my sadness under a smile. Tired of pretending I'm strong when I'm breaking. Tired of watching my sister walk through life like a guest of honor while I serve silently in the background. I've started writing letters I'll never send to my dad, to my sister, even to my younger self. In those letters, I remind myself that I am not the villain. I am not dramatic. I am not a problem. I am human. And I deserve to be seen, heard, and loved, not just for what I do, but for who I am. If that makes me selfish, so be it. If that makes me rebellious, I'll wear that title proudly, because I refuse to be invisible anymore. There comes a moment when silence becomes unbearable, when the weight of holding everything in starts to crush you from the inside. For me, that moment came on an ordinary Tuesday. Nothing dramatic happened. There was no screaming, no big fight. Just another day of feeling small. I had come home from a long day at school, mentally exhausted, emotionally drained, only to find that dinner still had to be made. My sister needed help with homework, and my dad was already complaining about something I hadn't even done yet. I stood in the kitchen, cutting vegetables with robotic movements, while my mind screamed, "When will it be my turn?" That night, I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't explain myself. I just made a decision. I decided that I will no longer sacrifice myself for a family that only sees me as useful, not valuable. I decided to stop trying to earn love through suffering. I decided to stop setting myself on fire to keep others warm. I've begun doing little things quietly for me. I applied for a scholarship that would allow me to study abroad. I haven't told anyone yet, but if I get it, I'm leaving. Not out of spite, not because I hate them, but because I love myself enough now to walk away from what's breaking me. I started journaling every night, not just to vent, but to rediscover who I am outside of being a daughter, a sister, a caretaker. For so long, my identity was wrapped up in everyone else's needs. Now I'm learning to ask myself, what do I need? I've stopped over-apologizing. I no longer say sorry for taking up space. When my sister mocks me, I walk away. When my father criticizes me unfairly, I remind myself his bitterness is not my burden to carry. Do I still get hurt? Of course. Healing isn't a straight line. Some nights the loneliness creeps in. Some mornings I still wake up with a heavy chest. But for the first time, that heaviness is mixed with something else: hope. Hope that I can build a life that feels like mine. Hope that I'll find people who appreciate me without demanding pieces of my soul in return. Hope that one day, when I have a family of my own, the cycle will end. Because I refuse to pass this pain forward. This generational burden of silenced voices, invisible labor, and unacknowledged trauma stops with me. I will not raise daughters who feel like they owe the world their exhaustion. I will not raise sons who think they deserve a woman's sacrifice without her consent. I'm still here, still in this house for now, but something inside me has shifted permanently. I'm no longer waiting for their love to feel whole. I am building that wholeness within myself, and that quiet, powerful act of self-love is the most rebellious thing I've ever done. They may never understand what I carried. They may never say thank you, but I see myself now, and I am finally enough. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own struggles, please give this video a like. Your support means the world and helps us share more real, powerful stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and join the community. Together, we can find strength in our shared experiences. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey.